Now that we've gone through general, let's actually start talking about the fun stuff, geometry. The first thing that you'll notice is the name of the actual 3D model that has been used to create this. So FP for Forest Pack, and we've got Wildgrass 09. So that is the name. The number next to this is representing the percentage of this model in your scene. So we'll dive into that a bit later because you obviously need more than one object to see a difference with this. The next button right over here is to add another item, which is really useful because you can add custom models as we've discussed already. So what I'm going to do here is, right over there, I'm going to click the X button. Now the X button is going to obviously delete the model in the Forest Pack Pro. So let's delete that. We still have the Forest Pack Pro item. We've just deleted what the geometry is showing. So what I can do here is I can click the plus button, and as I do that, you'll notice there's some triangles over here. What I can do again, I can click plus sign again, and then plus sign again. Now I've got 3 items, and you can see if I zoom in, I've got 3 different colors. Those colors are determined by these colors right over here. This is really useful so you can start seeing visually which item is too prominent in your actual scene. So the first thing I recommend is we actually add items. Let's click on the very first one, and it's called new item. So what I can do here is just call this sphere, press enter, zoom out, and go to this section over here. What I can potentially do is click on library. If I click on library, and I'm going to show you, and let's say I choose common grass again and load selected, it is going to delete everything that I previously done. So you cannot add 2 library presets together. There is a way of doing it which we'll dive through later. You basically create 2 planes, 2 forest packs, and that will give you a lot more control. So remember, if you're going to go through the library option, it's going to delete all your custom objects. If you wanted to, you would naturally load the actual forest pack item here, then you can add your own custom item. Let's delete and delete. Plus sign, start from the beginning. Let's go to sphere, press enter. Right over there says custom object. If I click the none, I can now select the sphere. So let's select the sphere, and then immediately it's populated that. As always, what I prefer to do, let's go to display, proxy, and now we can see it all in the pyramids. So what we see now is sphere 001 at 100%. We've got the color ID, which we can change over here. So in the event you do want to change the colors, feel free to do that. So now we know that all the reds are the spheres. Let's add another item. And this item over here, let's call this box, press enter. Remember, click the none, click the box. And now you can see it's immediately started populating again. Now, we both have them at 100%. That is just telling us that in the space that we want, so the plane that we are using, we want to fill the entire box, 100% of the actual object. If I click the plus sign one more time, let's call this pyramid, press enter, click the none, click the pyramid, 1, 2, 3, click, and now we have 3 awesome objects in there. And this is where the color ID is really, really useful because now we can see which one maybe is just too prominent in our scene. Okay, so we've got 3 objects with 3 different colors. So we've learned to change the name, we can easily change the color that we want, and of course we can delete it. If you have multiple objects and you want to select them all at once, you can do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all 3 of these guys, and I'm going to press the delete key again. This option right here brings up the lister. So what I can do here is I can select all the items that I do want. So let's go to pyramid, sphere, and of course the box. Clicking the add button will obviously add all 3 at once as opposed to going individually. Completely your choice. Now, you can also add in groups, but I want to show you how that is done. If I delete these again, I want to show you here. There are 3 objects here, and as you can see, it's called a group. If I come inside my Forest Pack Pro, and remember, it's really easy, go into the lister and simply just select the actual Forest Pack. If I click the plus sign, as I've just taught you, and underneath none, come over here and click, it is only adding the cylinder. If I click again, add another object, it is only going to add the tube. And that's not what we want. We want it as a group. So what you need to do to add a group, you click this button there, which is the lister, and you find the group that you want to add. By selecting the group and clicking the add button, notice it is one object and everything is inside. There is something very important to know about this. Let's open up this group quickly. So group and click open. If I move an object from this group, it is going to affect this. Let me show you. Notice how everything is moving and shifting. So this is really important, that when you're moving objects inside of your group, that they are going to affect your actual forest pack. So what I can do is, let's go into an interactive render. Let's go into here, and I'm going to move these guys around, and you can start seeing how it's really starting to manipulate the actual render. So really important that if you're using groups, whatever's in that group needs to stay as it is. Okay, let us stop this render. Let's go back into perspective mode and close this group. Back into the forest. Let's delete that group right over there. The next one is copy and paste, which again is really awesome. So what I'm going to do is I am going to grab my object, my plane. Let's load a forest pack item. Again, common grass is fine. Click the load selected. I'm going to select the plane. If this message pops up, it's telling you that to use large areas, it is recommended to use camera clipping at render time. So what it's telling you is that if your scene is really large and you have a very large space and you want to populate it with grass and trees and everything using forest pack, that's fine, you can do that. But to conserve render time, it is only going to render what the camera is seeing. We will dive into that a bit later, and then we will discuss how we can manipulate that ourselves. For now, just click the yes button and then we can carry on working. Let's go into the modify tab. So what I do, I select the item at once, I click copy. It's now in the clipboard. So what I need to do is select my new plane. We need to create a forest pack item here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to generate an item right there. Modify tab. And what I can do now is I have to create a new item first. So creating the new item, selecting the new item, which is blank, and then pasting that item. Awesome. So let's go back into our forest pack. Right over here, we got our spheres, which is fine. Now these two over here allows you to manipulate the order at which you have put the objects in. So for example, let's click and click. So we got two new items. So just for now, I'm going to do the box, and this one I am going to do the pyramid. To make life easier, I'm going to go back into the pyramid mode. So what I can do here is I can click on the sphere and I can change the hierarchy. So I'm just going to put that at the very bottom. If you keep your cursor over here, you can manipulate this down and up, because some of the presets have 10, 15, 20 different items. So if you want to see all of them and manipulate the hierarchy, you can click and drag this all the way down. So that really, really does help as well. Next, we have these properties. So we've got this little arrow over here. If I click that, it's actually going to minimize all the properties. So it's a menu within a menu. So again, you can manipulate that if you want to see that. So we've already discussed that if I click on library, it is going to delete everything in here, and it's going to put its own library in there from the preset. So just remember that. Over here, we got the color ID, which we discussed. We got the sphere name. So remember, each item here can have its own actual name and color ID. Disabled is a really cool function as well. Instead of deleting it, what we can do, for example, sphere. So we know that all of these cream colors, it's the sphere. If I click disabled, it will just remove it from the list. It is still there, but it's just not active. So that's really helpful. If you want to put it back in, you simply just click on custom object again, and it obviously puts it back into and activates it. So that's disabled and technically re-enable. Next is templates. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into this really long plane over here. I'm going to select the long plane. Let's go to forest pack, make sure nothing's selected. I'm going to select on this plane right over here. Let's go to modify panel. And what we're going to do is we're going to use what is called a billboard. So I'm going to go to library, and I'm going to go underneath 2D. Let's choose trees. You can choose any tree that you want. Let's choose this guy right there, red oak. Clicking the load selected button, give it a couple of seconds to load. And there we go. Now for the 2D Forest Pack Pros, I generally go straight to mesh because it already is low poly. So I'm going to click on mesh and have a look what it has created for us. It is now 2D planes of trees. What I am going to do is I'm going to start up an interactive render, and I want to show you this area that we get here. So material type forest material is not supported. I have chatted to the team at Forest Pack, and the 2D planes are not compatible with the Corona rendering engine. So this is something that we have to find a workaround around, which is rather very easy. So what we can do is the following. If I go into the trees, you'll see we get this. It's telling you that the unsupported material, which is called forest material, just doesn't work. So I'm going to stop this render. let's go into the material editor, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and eyedropper tool the actual tree. So the material node that is just not working is this one right over here. So forest material, this just does not work with the actual 2D plane in Forest Pack. So there's a couple of ways that we can do this. One, we've got the texture map, so we can just recreate our very own Forest Pack material. So all we need to do is just go to Corona Physical Material, and what I find is very, very easy is just to grab the diffuse, which goes into the base color, and then the opacity can simply go into the opacity color right over there. And what I do now is in the Forest Pack Pro settings, if you look underneath material, what we can do here is click and drag right there and instance that. Once you've done that, it's now going to work. We can then click render. So as you can see, very simple to work around that. Let's stop this render. Let's go into perspective mode. So our next option over here is we've got it as a one plane. If I choose two planes, notice how it's doubled up now. So if I go to the top view, you'll now see that there are two planes. And this helps when you have different angles to be viewed at the same time. But more importantly, it's for the shadows. We can go up to 3 planes and even 4 planes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this plane right over there, and I'm going to increase it. Let's go back into the rendering mode, and we'll have a look at the difference in the shadows. So right over there, you can see the shadows are quite full. If I go back into one plane, you see how it's limiting the shadows. Again, 2 plane will increase shadows. So again, if you are using the 2D plane billboard mode, which is this mode over here, just remember, play around with the planes to give you better shadows. These two functions over here allow you to actually change the size of the actual billboards. So again, this locks it. This will then allow you to manually change the different sizes that you want. Next is custom object, which we've already discussed. That is obviously when you want to create a completely custom made model that you want to add to your Forest Pack. Let's go back to this Forest Pack item and have a look at the next set of options we have. If I click on box, the next one that we have is called clear. So you can see it says box 001. If I click on clear, it will remove that, keeping the item, but it has removed the object. I can then of course replace it by choosing another object. It's not a problem. Next we have the scale function. Now, as I mentioned earlier, every single object inside here in the geometry box will have its own parameters, which means is if I, for example, feel that the boxes or the pyramids or even the spheres are just too big in the actual render, I can change it using the scale button over here. Let's quickly do a render and have a look. So right now we can see that the boxes are quite big. So we select the box, go underneath scale, and if I change that to, let's say, 50%, press enter, it obviously changes all of that. For a better example, let's choose library and let's actually change it. So remember, by adding a library preset, we're going to remove all of the custom objects that we've done there. Let's go to Daisy01 detail, click the load selected button, give it a couple of seconds, remember this, say yes, and once it's loaded, let's have a look at what we've got. Now we've got quite a big library over here, quite a lot of items. Let's start the interactive render, and now we can start seeing all these items playing an effect on our actual scene. So what we can do from here, and remember, you can customize all of this. For example, if I select all of the daisies, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, I can actually disable all of them, and that means we won't see any of the daisies. What I can do is select the daisy, let's go back to the custom object, and now we can start seeing these daisies. If I feel they are just too big in the scene, this is where the scale parameter comes in. So I'm going to make it 200% just to show the effect. And as you can see, only those were scaled upwards. So again, a lot of customization and flexibility when it comes to using even these presets. Next we have the Z or Z offsets. Now again, each one is going to be unique to this. So if we feel that they are sticking too far out of the ground, or they are floating, or you want them to go further down, this is where that parameter comes into play. So let's get a bit of a better view. Let's zoom in. So we've selected the daisies, and what I can do over here is if I go to the offset and just start decreasing this, let's do it by 20. -100, you can see that I'm actually moving it further down. So this is a good idea if you want them to physically be bigger but not taller or higher, but you want to keep them in proportion. This is where this can really help you as well. Next is center displacement. Now what this one's going to do is going to allow you to shift the actual object on its own pivot point. Now I've got an example to show you. Let's stop this. Let's go into perspective mode. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the line that I created right over here. Forest pack, let us select this object right over there, modify tab. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new object. I want to choose a template and I want it to be a one plane billboard. Now remember, if you don't see anything here, remember to go underneath the distribution and just reduce this all the way until you start seeing it. Now because it's a billboard, we can easily go underneath the display, make sure we click on mesh. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the material editor and I've got a very simple material created. It is just a lamppost. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag and make sure you instance the material right into the slot and say yes. Now the great thing is when you create a brand new template using the billboard, notice how the planes will follow your actual screen, which is amazing. So this is where it can be really useful. This line is going to represent where I want all of these lampposts to be. The problem is, as you can see, it's completely off. This is where the center displacement can help. So by scrolling that, you can get it just in line, and then at least it will fit within your design. Again, you can see that it's floating quite a bit. So again, this is where we can just reduce it until we are happy with it. And there we go. So that is the center displacement. Next is the collision radius. So what I want to do is I'm going to click on the interactive render. We're going to jump back into the daisies that we have over here. Let's go to top view and see what we got. Now the collision is going to allow us to determine how many objects collide with one another. Sometimes you want objects to collide, other times you don't want them to collide. It's completely up to you and what you are trying to create. When it comes to vegetation such as this, you do want them to collide because it just looks a lot more realistic. So what we're going to do is we're going to delete everything here again. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the pyramid, the sphere, and the box. Clicking the add button. And there we go. So as the render starts, we can see all the objects together. They're on top of one another. They're colliding. They're inside. It's just a complete mess. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the pyramid and the sphere. Let's disable these guys right over there. And we are just left with the boxes. Now that the boxes are busy rendering on their own, we can now start controlling the collision. So you can see that they are just chaotic right now. So the collision radius is linked to this tab right over here called collisions. So let's enable this right over there. And immediately you can see a huge difference. So what's happened is the following. The object box has its own collision radius of 100%. So the entire object has its own protective bubble. By enabling the fact that we do not want collisions and we're leaving it at 100%, we are telling Forest Pack that we don't want any boxes to collide with one another. If I had to increase this by 200%, we are doubling the radius. So each box, double that size, is now its protective layer, which means we're going to see less boxes. Okay, let's go back to 100%. The collision radius itself, if we do want a little bit of collision within itself, we can control the collision radius of its own box and reduce that. So if I go by, let's say 50%, that means that we are allowing the collisions to happen only 50% of that box. So there's a lot of configuration that we can do here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the pyramid and the sphere. Let's activate them. And all of these guys, let's put them back at 100. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to leave this. Let's do a 200 over here. And now you can start seeing that with the collisions radius, we can start controlling how many objects we do and do not want to collide with one another. Here's another great example. If I grab the sphere, and the sphere, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this at 0, which means that I don't mind collisions of the sphere within itself, but if you've noticed, there's no collision with the pyramid and the box. Next we have the height. Now at default, if it's at 0, the protective layer starts on the Z-axis at 0%. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these guys. Let's actually stop the render. Let's stop this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom out. I've added another object in over here. So let's grab this plane here. Let's grab a Forest Pack and let's select that. We're going to add 2 objects this time. We're going to add 2 custom objects. The one is the tall tree. Say yes. The second one is going to be the small shrub. Say yes again. Let's go into an interactive render again. And what I'm going to do is I'm now going to zoom in and have a look. So in situations like this where you've got tall trees and small trees or shrubs or anything like that, there is going to be a huge collision that's going to start happening. And this is where the height radius is going to allow you to dictate which ones actually get deleted. So if I zoom in over here, you can actually see exactly what's busy happening. So what we can do is obviously first thing is to enable the collisions, and immediately you can see a huge difference. Now by playing with the height radius, for example, if I put the height at 100% and press enter, you can start seeing that not only more shrubs are coming, but more trees as well. Reducing the radius, let's say by 50%, will now allow more trees to overlap all of the bushes. So again, a lot of flexibility when it comes to this. Next on the list is the probability. So let's stop this render quickly. And what I'm going to do is we're going to grab another forest pack. We are going to choose the plane right over there. And what I'm going to do for this example, we're going to go to library and let's choose Daisy01 detail. Load selector, give it a couple of seconds. Let's say yes. Okay, once it's loaded, let us grab a render. Let's start it up and have a look at how many items we actually have here. Now, I mentioned probability. That is the number next to each item. So what it's saying is out of 100% of the space, 93% is for this item, and all of these values here are representing what each one is actually showing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these guys. I'm just going to disable them. And let's actually disable all of these and just leave one of them available. So this one right here is the only one that's available, 0.7%. If I come down here and change the probability, let's say to 100%, that means 100% of the space is going to be used for these daisies. So each item can be controlled. So if you're using one of the presets and you see that perhaps it's got too many daisies, flowers, or anything like that, what you can do is just find that item, change the probability, and you can increase or decrease each item. Okay, let's put this back at 7%. Let's put all of these back, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the next two items, which is randomize and normalize. Okay, now that they're all activated, what normalize will do is it takes all of these values and makes sure that they all add up to 100%. So right now it is normalized. If you had to take all of these values, add them together, you get 100%. The randomize feature is going to take a percentage from 0 to 100% for each item. So let's have a look. Randomize, say yes. Now have a look. 18, 53, 76, the list goes on and on and on. So this is really randomized, way past 100% in totality. So if you don't like this, what you can do is go to normalize, 1, 2, 3, click, and what it's going to do is it's going to grab all these values and completely randomize the values, but it's going to constrain it to a 100% value, meaning if you take all these values together, it will add up to 100%. Whereas the randomize feature takes all of them and it can be a value of 0 to 100%. Next is the global scale. Now this parameter here will change the global scale of all the items. We already discussed that each item can change with its own size. So each one can have its own size. This is the global value. So if I change this to 10, it changes all of them to 10%. Consolidate materials. This is possible to disable the auto material feature and assign materials manually, although honestly it's not recommended. You can uncheck it, and if you make a mistake, you can just say reassign material. And that's it for the geometry rollout. I'll catch you in the next lesson.